museum stairs with heavy, tired steps. It was nearly 11 p.m., and he was preparing for the start of his night shift. The city's Natural History Museum, with its massive dinosaur statues and dazzling exhibits, was a place full of excitement and wonder during the day. But at night, nights were a completely different story. Adam turned the key in the lock and entered the security office. The dim emergency lights illuminated the semi-dark corridors, casting strange shadows on the walls. He put his bag on the desk and took a deep breath. He thought to himself, just one more night. Just one more night until the weekend. Adam was 32 years old and had been working this job for about 6 months. He used to work for a security company, but when the opportunity to work at the museum came up, he thought it would be a quieter and less troublesome job. What a mistake. From the very first weeks, he realized that something wasn't right in this museum. Strange sounds, sudden movements of objects, and the constant feeling that someone or something was watching him. He checked the CCTV monitors. Everything seemed calm. The main hall with its giant Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton in the center, the mammal hall with its stuffed animal specimens, and the precious stones gallery with the famous Knight's Eye diamond gleaming in the central display case. Adam decided to do a round on the ground floor. He picked up his flashlight and left the office. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the empty corridors. He tried to reassure himself. Everything's normal. It's just an empty museum. There's nothing strange here. But just then, he heard a rustling sound from behind him. He quickly turned and shone his flashlight in that direction. There was nothing, just a large wolf statue staring at him with its glass eyes. Adam breathed a sigh of relief and continued on his way. As he passed by the ancient civilizations exhibit, he felt the air temperature suddenly drop. He could see his breath, and a shiver ran through his body. Strange, he thought to himself. The ventilation system shouldn't be on right now. Suddenly, he heard the sound of breaking glass from the floor above. His heart started racing. Had a thief come? Or maybe something had just fallen. He cautiously moved towards the stairs, gripping his flashlight tightly. When he reached the second floor, he heard a whispering sound. A sound like a murmur, but not quite human. The sound was coming from the direction of the ancient Egypt gallery. Adam hesitantly went that way. His flashlight beam fell on the mummies inside their glass coffins, creating strange shadows. And that's where he saw it. One of the mummies, which had previously been lying in its coffin, was now sitting up and staring directly at Adam. Adam felt his heart stop for a moment. This was impossible. He must be hallucinating. But when the mummy started to move, Adam realized this was real. He backed away in horror, and his foot caught on something. He lost his balance and fell to the floor. The flashlight fell from his hand and rolled, its light falling on the ceiling and plunging the room into relative darkness. If you enjoyed it so far, please hit the subscribe button if you liked the video. The sound of rustling and movement came from all sides. Adam struggled to his feet and ran towards the door, but it was locked. He looked around in panic. Now he could see that it wasn't just that one mummy. All the mummies in the gallery had come out of their coffins and were slowly moving towards him. Adam pounded on the door with all his might, calling for help. But he knew no one would hear him. He was the only one in the museum at this hour. Suddenly a deep and terrifying laugh filled the space. Adam turned and saw with horror that the large statue of Anubis, The Egyptian god of death had turned its head towards him and was staring at him with glowing red eyes. "Welcome, Night Guard," a deep inhuman voice came from the statue's mouth. "We've been waiting for someone like you for a long time." Adam felt the world spinning around him. This couldn't be real, but the pain of the bony nails of the mummies now gripping his arms was very real. "We need a fresh soul," Anubis continued as he came down from his pedestal. "A soul that can guide us in this new world. And you, dear Adam, have been chosen." Adam tried to free himself, but the mummies held him tight. He could smell the pungent scent of embalming materials and thousand-year-old dust. His heart was beating so hard, he thought it might burst out of his chest. "Please," Adam said with a trembling voice. "I'm just a simple guard. I don't know anything. Please, let me go." Anubis laughed, his voice like pebbles falling on a rock. "Oh, dear Adam, you know much more than you think. You are our key, the key to our return to this world." At that moment, the sound of the museum's large clock rang out. Midnight had arrived. With each chime, Adam felt a part of his being disappear, as if his soul was being separated from his body piece by piece. "Ah, the time for the ceremony has come," Anubis said, and reached out his hand towards Adam. "Don't be afraid, Adam. You're not going to die. You're just going to change." Adam screamed with his last strength and tried to free himself, but the mummies were dragging him towards a large coffin in the center of the room. A coffin that wasn't there before. As they put him inside the coffin, Adam could see that the patterns on the walls had started to move. The hieroglyphs were detaching from the wall and floating in the air, as if they had come alive. "Welcome to our family, Adam," Anubis said as he closed the coffin lid. "From this moment on, you will be the eternal guardian of this museum, a guardian who keeps our secret and allows us to come alive every night." Adam felt his body start to change. His skin was becoming dry and wrinkled, but strangely, it didn't hurt anymore. Instead, he felt an odd sense of calm, as if all his worries and fears were fading away. Anubis's voice was the last thing he heard. "Sleep well, our new guardian. Tomorrow night, your new life begins." And with these words, complete darkness enveloped him. The next morning, when the museum staff came to work, they found no trace of Adam. The security cameras hadn't recorded anything unusual. They only showed Adam patrolling the museum at midnight, and then he had disappeared. The police conducted an extensive investigation, but found no clues. Adam's family was worried and distressed, but no one knew what had happened to him. The only thing that had changed was a new mummy in the ancient Egypt gallery. A mummy that wasn't there before, and no one knew where it had come from. A mummy that, if someone looked closely, they could recognize a familiar face. A face that bore a strange resemblance to Adam. Weeks passed, and life in the museum seemingly returned to normal. But the museum staff had noticed strange changes. At night, mysterious sounds could be heard from the corridors. Sometimes, the night guards felt like someone was watching them, but every time they turned around, no one was there. Sarah, one of the museum guides, was more sensitive to these changes than anyone else. She felt that something in the museum had changed, but she couldn't say exactly what. One night, as she was guiding the last visitors towards the exit, her eyes fell on the new mummy. Sarah thought to herself, "Strange, I hadn't seen this mummy here before." She went closer to examine it. Something about the mummy's face looked familiar. Sarah leaned in to look closer, and suddenly the mummy's eyes opened. Sarah jumped back in horror and screamed, but when she looked again, the mummy's eyes were closed. She thought she must have imagined it. That night, Sarah decided to stay in the museum after hours. She wanted to find out what was happening. She hid in the security office and waited. When midnight struck, Sarah heard movement from the ancient Egypt gallery. She cautiously left the office and went towards the sound. What she saw rooted her to the spot. The mummies had come out of their coffins and were walking around the hall. In the center of them stood the new mummy, seemingly talking to the others. Sarah listened carefully and could make out some words. "We must be careful. We can't let anyone find out about our secret." Sarah's heart raced as she heard these words. The voice was familiar, very familiar. Suddenly she realized it was Adam's voice. She backed away in horror, but her foot hit something and made a loud noise. All the mummies turned towards her. Sarah started running, but the exit was blocked. The mummies surrounded her. The mummy with Adam's voice came forward. "Sarah, don't be afraid. We don't want to harm you, but we can't let anyone know about our secret." Sarah asked with fear and surprise, "Adam, is that you? What happened to you?" Adam, or what was once Adam, sighed. "I'm now part of this museum, Sarah, and unfortunately you must become part of it too." Sarah tried to escape, but the mummies caught her. Anubis emerged from the shadows and said, "Welcome to our family, Sarah. Don't worry, you won't feel much pain." The next morning, the museum staff found that Sarah had disappeared too, and in the ancient Egypt gallery, another new mummy had appeared. From that day on, rumors spread about the museum. They said that at night, the sound of footsteps and whispers could be heard from the corridors. Some claimed to have seen the mummies moving, but no one dared to stay in the museum at night to discover the truth. The museum continued its operations, but now it held a dark secret in its heart. A secret that came alive every night when the last visitor left the museum and the doors were closed. And Adam and Sarah were now the eternal guardians of this secret, condemned to live in the world between the dead and the living.